It's the Wiltfong Whip Around with Steve Wiltfong. Today's Thursday, July 25th, and I'm your host, Josh Newberg. We're live from Nashville, and Steve is in Indianapolis. He's on location today from the Big Ten Media Days. We got a ton of recruiting info to cover today, as this is the final visit weekend of the summer for the 2025 class. So some major developments to talk about. But before we get going, you guys hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel, the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, whether it's the 5-Star Flex, the Wiltfong Whip Around, or the Inside Scoop. We got you covered. All right, let's bring on Steve Wiltfong. Steve, we're going to open the show with some 5-star buzz. Let's start with Trey McNutt. Some big news here. Trey McNutt, the 5-star out of Shaker Heights, Ohio. He's going to be at Texas A&M this weekend. Now, he's trending towards Oregon. Probably would have selected the Ducks last weekend had his decision gone off his plan. But now Texas A&M has another opportunity to show him one more shot, one more chance to lure him in.
Josh, I'm texting with Trey McNutt right now, and he tells me that he will be at Oregon after this Texas A&M visit this weekend. So he's going to see his top two schools one more time before announcing college decision on the On3 Recruits channel on August 3rd. I still like where Oregon stands going into these finals, but obviously he wants to give Texas A&M one more. Talks about the elite safety coaching between Mike Elko and Coach Ish. But I still think that Oregon is the program to beat, and they'll get the final say in Trey McNutt's process. I also want to say thanks to Andy Staples, who's given us our setup here given us his setup here at Big Ten Media here at Lincoln Oil Stadium. Make sure you're watching his show 6 days a week over at the On3 YouTube channel.
So who do you like for Trey McNutt right now?
Oregon, Josh. I'm still riding with the Ducks. That's where my On3 RPM is. I always reserve the right to change my mind, but I think that Oregon is the one to beat going into these next two visits. It's up to Texas A&M to flip that during his 2 days on campus, Thursday and Friday. Then they have to maintain it through one more Oregon visit and then a week before he announces with us on the On3 YouTube channel, On3 Recruits YouTube channel.
All right, now 5-star athlete Michael Terry out of the state of Texas is going to have a whirlwind weekend in this final visit weekend of the summer. Tell the people about Michael Terry's 3-visit weekend.
Yeah, he's going to have an exciting 6 days. It's Texas for 2 days today. Then he gets back to Oregon. Going to be a massive recruiting weekend for the Ducks in Eugene for Saturday Night Live. And then he's going to spend Monday and Tuesday of next week before the dead period back at Nebraska. That is a newly added trip for the Huskers. So those are the three programs that look to be the front runners. Texas A&M fading in the top four. But Texas, Oregon, and Nebraska now fighting it out for Michael Terry, the number one ranked athlete.
Yeah, that's pretty big news for Oregon, especially since they're losing Deshaun Brom. At least that's on the RPM. A lot of foot picks going in for him to Tennessee. So would Michael Terry kind of alleviate that loss of Brom if that happens?
Well, Michael Terry III is obviously one of the most versatile offensive players in the country. That's why we rank him as the number one athlete in the land. And when we had him at the On3 Elite Series in May, Josh, as you know, he told me that he thought maybe he would play some running back on the next level. Then 10 minutes later told you wide receiver. That's how versatile he is. He could certainly fill an offensive void for Oregon if they do indeed lose Deshaun Brame to Tennessee, which is how I see that recruitment trending going into the weekend for the Vols. But Michael Terry is a guy that Oregon was prioritizing and wanted to have in the fold alongside Deshaun Brame. But certainly if they're able to add Michael Terry, if they lose Deshaun Brame, that softens the blow.
All right. Now you have some intel on offensive tackle David Sanders. You texted me this morning and said, Josh, I want to talk David Sanders. So go ahead.
Well, I still think that there's a good possibility that he ends up taking some visits this weekend. And the first school you think about is Nebraska. When you look at his Final Four, he's been to the other three programs several times. An opportunity to get back to Nebraska, I think, could be crucial in this recruitment as they make a move here in the Final Four. And these other finalists are not sleeping on Nebraska right now. And then Tennessee, closer to home, they got a big recruiting weekend this weekend. So wouldn't be surprising if we saw him pop up in Knoxville as well. I know him and his family family continue to work through their schedule, their itinerary. But Samantha Sanders told me a week ago what school is going to get that final look for David Sanders. If you're asking me who I think it could be, I think Nebraska and Tennessee are the two from the Final Four that make the most sense.
Well, what should Ohio State fans feel if David Sanders goes to Knoxville and then visits Nebraska as well? I mean, how should they feel after this weekend?
Well, obviously, you wish he was on your campus every single day, but they've gotten him to Columbus quite a bit, 3 times this calendar year, then 1 time last fall. There's still regular communication with David Sanders and all his finalists. Nebraska and Tennessee are having big recruiting weekends this weekend. So those are other reasons why those 2 schools make sense.
All right, safety Jonah Williams out of the state of Texas, the #1 safety in the country. He's going to be on 2 campuses this weekend. He's going to be at Texas today on Thursday. Then he's going to take a 2-day trip to LSU. What does that mean for Jonah Williams and his recruitment? And he's also set a decision date for August 25th.
Yeah, I think he's still undecided going into that date, but I think this is a recruitment that could go a few different ways. You know, there was a time where I thought Texas A&M emerged as a leader following several visits in the spring. But LSU, when you talk to sources around this recruitment, they're in the top 2 or 3. And then Oregon was a program that there was some positive vibes coming out of his official visit to Eugene in June. Texas A&M, I don't feel the same amount of confidence around College Station, although they still hang around in that recruitment. And so, we'll see what happens here down the stretch as it really ramps up for Jonah Williams, who's also going to play baseball at the school of his choice. He's hitting 94 miles per hour this summer on his fastball. That's pretty darn good for a left-hander. So coveted in both sports. LSU, Billy Embody just fired in an on-3 RPM prediction for LSU right now. I'm not feeling bad about that pick right now. I'm sitting on Texas A&M, but I'm a little worried about it as I talk to you this morning.
All right. Now, quarterback Julian Lewis. It's been too quiet on the Julian Lewis front. Now, he did tell us at the Nashville event, on 3 Elite event, that he was going to make a final decision this summer. He was going to make some sort of announcement. What are you hearing on Julian Lewis? And do you think that we're going to get some finality on his recruitment this summer?
You know, I don't know. I think it's just one thing that's remained fluid, but I'll say this. I think there's confidence around USC that he'll remain in the fold. I think there's confidence around Colorado that they ultimately flip him. Indiana lying in the weeds with Tino Sinceri having the best relationship with Julian Lewis and his family. Auburn is the program that at times we thought was hot in this recruitment. Maybe they get hot again. Maybe Julian Lewis, if he were to call Hugh Freeze and say, I want in, they can't turn that down. I also think that Auburn's looking at a couple other potential flips at that quarterback position right now. So it's real interesting to follow Auburn recruiting right now as they head into Big Cat recruiting weekend. But I think that there's, Julian Lewis has given these programs reason to feel confident at all those places at this point in the summer.
All right, guys, that's our 5-star buzz to open the show. Let us know, how do you feel about Trey McNutt, Michael Terry, David Sanders, Jonah Williams, Julian Lewis? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, Steve, there are some big visit weekends taking place, and let's start in Athens because the dog days of summer are here. A couple 5-star defensive linemen expected to be on campus in Elijah Griffin and Justice Terry. Steve, this seems like it's setting up to be a historic D-line class for the Dogs.
Yeah, Chad Simmons with the news on Justice Terry. I had the news on Elijah Griffin. Big recruiting weekend at Georgia. I think those are 2 5-stars that it's hard for us to not see them in Georgia's class. Even when Justice Terry committed to USC, if you would have asked me a minute after he announced to USC back during the spring where I thought he would sign come December, I would have said Georgia. So I just think right now it's trending heavy for Georgia to land them both. Obviously, Justice Terry's looking at places like Alabama, and Elijah Griffin took official visits to USC and Miami, but I still think that Georgia's going to be hard to beat for both coveted in-state 5-stars.
All right. Now, Georgia is not trending for on 300 cornerback Jonte Gilbert. He's actually trending towards NC State, but he will be in Athens this weekend. If the Dogs push, do you think that we could be looking at a momentum shift coming out of this weekend? Because his decision is also right around the corner.
Well, they are pushing, and I talked to Jonte Gilbert this week, and he said they're getting the last visit. He's excited to get back around the coaching staff. I think it's up to Georgia to prove to him that they love him as a player and that they're going to give him every opportunity to succeed on the field, because NC State's the program to beat. He believes in that program, believes in his trajectory as a player there, and knows that staff has been fully vested in him the entire cycle. Georgia's turning it up right now, so it's a big visit for the Bulldog staff to show him that he is wanted, that he is coveted in Athens, and so we'll see how that goes this week.
All right. Georgia also going to have a whole host of 2026 targets on campus, including their prize QB commitment, Jared Curtis. This is just going to lay the foundation for Georgia's 2026 cycle. Do you think that we could see any 2026 early commitments coming out of this weekend?
I think one 2026 prospect you're keeping an eye on right now for Georgia is four-star cornerback on 300 Jonesboro prospect Jontavius Wyman. Colleague Chad Simmons recently logged an on 3 RPM in favor of the home state powerhouse for Wyman. So certainly he's a guy to keep an eye on.
All right, let's whip it around to Lincoln, Nebraska, where the Huskers, they have a couple big names on campus, could get even bigger if that one offensive tackle, David Sanders Jr., arrives. But let's start with Isaiah Mosey. He is committed to Oregon. Is this in Nebraska? Should Nebraska fans have Mosey on flip watch?
Well, I think that they're in an interesting position because since he's committed to Oregon, he took an official visit to Nebraska. Now he's coming back again, and his father, Jamar Mosey, works in an off-field role at Nebraska after previously working at UCF. So there's a lot of good things going in Nebraska's favor, but this is a family that's always believed in Matt Rule, trajectory of the program. It's felt like a priority, has had great visits to Lincoln in the past, also visited in the spring. It's obvious, Josh, you love to say follow the visits. Nebraska is a program that is trending if you look at that metric alone.
Yeah, and, following the visits, I was following Michael Terry, the five-star athlete out of Texas. He took that official visit to Nebraska back in April, hasn't been back since. Thought, hey, if Michael Terry's going to choose Nebraska, he needs to make it back there in July. And guess what's happening this weekend? Five-star Michael Terry on campus. Do the Huskers have a legit shot at landing the number one athlete in America?
I'm not sleeping on Nebraska for anybody here right now at this point in the process. It seems like they are pedal to the metal. And I think between relationships with the staff and what they're able to present off the field with their infrastructure, they're an exciting place right now for their top targets. When Michael Terry took his official visit to Nebraska for the spring game back in April, the local newspaper had a top flap story on what an important, coveted recruit Michael Terry was. So as soon as he got off the plane, he sees the newspaper, he feels important, has a great official visit. The way Nebraska plans to use him in the offense is exciting. He loves being around that coaching staff, and with them adding them as the last visit, I think they're in an exciting position. And I don't think Michael Terry's made up his mind. I think Texas maybe grabbed some momentum during the official visits, but Oregon's in the thick of it, and now you have Nebraska looking to make a late move.
Yeah, so could be interesting there. And obviously the big name everybody wants to know is David Sanders. What are you hearing about a potential visit to Lincoln this weekend?
Well, when I talked to Samantha Sanders, David's mom, a week or so ago, she said that they were putting together their itinerary for this final week. What school does David want to take a final look at before announcing his college decision? And Nebraska makes sense. He's been to Tennessee numerous times, been to Ohio State 3 times this year, been to Georgia a bunch during his process. He's only been to Nebraska once, Mother's Day weekend, for his official visit. And so I would not be surprised at all. And when you're shaking trees and talking to sources, if David Sanders is at Nebraska this weekend, and that'd be another opportunity for him to get around this coaching staff in person, maybe get around some players and see how he fits in with those guys, and continue to talk about the important factors for him in his process.
Steve, we've been talking a lot about Nebraska, and for much of the spring and especially into the summer, we've been talking 1A, 1B, and that's Ohio State and Tennessee. However you want to put 1A and 1B, it's those two teams. If David Sanders does show up at Nebraska this weekend, does that change?
I'd have to answer that question afterwards, Josh, because we'll have to see how another Nebraska visit would resonate. But I think it's obvious when he put out his top 4 that he's got a great deal of intrigue and interest in Nebraska. And it started with him watching Dylan Raiola flip from Georgia to Nebraska. And Dylan Raiola was one of the top peer recruiters in the country when he was committed to Ohio State, then flipped to Georgia. And even though he's battling for a job at Nebraska, Matt Rule told me yesterday he was born to play quarterback, but he's also in the facility at 6 a.m. He's also recruiting Nebraska's top targets, trying to bring in the best players around him to help restore glory at a program that's so close to his family. I know he's been on David Sanders a lot, and so we'll see what a visit this weekend to Lincoln does.
Yeah, if he shows up in Lincoln, I'm bumping Ohio State out of that 1A, 1B conversation. I think it's Tennessee, Nebraska, but like you said, we'll see what happens after this weekend. He's got to show up first. All right. Now, you did mention Raiola. He's visiting this weekend. Not Dylan Raiola, but Dayton Raiola, the younger brother, the 2026 quarterback. Dayton Raiola visiting Lincoln this weekend. Is he a rising star in the recruiting world?
Well, we'll see. He's got to be the starting quarterback this fall. But he's got some talent. I've seen him throw on air in workouts when he was in Arizona. And then he got a chance to throw in front of the Nebraska staff at their camp this summer. They've offered him a scholarship. They're obviously the one to beat right now going into this visit. He's excited to get on campus again, see his brother. He hadn't seen his brother in a little bit. And obviously Nebraska's the one to beat for Dayton Raiola right now.
All right, there you go. Nebraska fans, chime in. Let us know if David Sanders shows up this weekend, how we feel, and let us know. Comment section below. All right, let's head out to South Bend where Notre Dame's Grill and Chill weekend is all set. Notre Dame, they are loaded when it comes to 2025. They got over 20 commitments. I think they're at 22, 23 right now for that 25 cycle. What's left for Notre Dame in this current 25 class?
Well, they'd still like to add another linebacker. Madden Faramo from California is certainly one of their top targets at that position. And wide receiver, getting an explosive player after losing out on Derek Meadows and Tanu Hines here at the end of summer is going to be a priority for Marcus Freeman, Mike Denbrock, and company. They're going to continue to recruit Derek Meadows moving forward. For a lot of his process, they were considered the program to beat. He's committed to LSU, but Notre Dame's going to try and keep Derek Meadows warm the rest of the way through. But they'll certainly be evaluating wide receivers and trying to find a potential big play guy to add to what's already a terrific class.
All right, now we know that there's going to be an elite group of 2026 prospects on campus for Notre Dame this weekend. Tell Irish fans who they need to know.
Well, it starts with the number one safety in the country, Blaine Bradford. He's going to spend 3 days on campus up at Notre Dame this weekend. He goes to a Catholic school in Louisiana, been high on Notre Dame for a long time, led by Marty Biaggi and Marcus Freeman and the rapport they've built with them. And he hasn't been to South Bend in 2 years, so they're excited to get back up and get back around the coaching staff and the players. But Notre Dame's one of the front runners for Blaine Bradford. Same to be said for on 300 safety Joey O'Brien, who's one of the freaky-looking safeties in this class. They got a great shot at him. And then out of Chicago, Simeon, Mikel Blade, on 300 defensive end, an important recruit for Notre Dame in the cycle. I think the Irish lead right now, but he's going to visit Miami this weekend. Miami was first to offer their program that could be a thorn in the side for Notre Dame. But as it stands early in the process, I think they lead for the 4-star Mikel Blade. There's a lot of big-time players on Notre Dame's campus this weekend, so you're going to want to stay locked into On 3 and Blue and Gold Illustrated for reaction coming out of the big recruiting weekend.
Absolutely. All right, let's whip it around. Let's go down to LSU. Bayou Splash this weekend. A couple 5-stars on campus. We'll start with wide receiver Jamie French. Announced this weekend that he's going to make it to LSU one last time. How big is this for the Tigers?
Everyone's trying to make a move on Texas, and you got LSU and you got Miami in this. Chad Simmons also reporting that he's going to be at both LSU and Miami. So Miami's kind of the program that I'm viewing as the big dark horse right now for Jamie French. But LSU's always been in the middle of it, and he's got a really good relationship with Coach Cortez, Coach Sloan, and certainly loves the track record of recent receiver development at LSU. So they're in there. I give the inch to Texas going into his late August decision, but Miami's kind of the one that's really got my attention, but we'll see if I feel differently about LSU coming out of this weekend as well.
Yeah, we will see. How about Jonah Williams? He's going to be in the Bayou this weekend, the 5-star safety from the state of Texas, and he had just announced that he's going to make a decision on August 25th, so this is a very important visit.
Yeah, we've been talking about LSU and Jonah Williams a lot on recent episodes of Whip Around. When you talk to sources with knowledge of the recruitment, they say they're at least in the top 2 or 3 for him, and they seem to be rising, getting back to campus. Also going to visit Texas this week. But LSU in an intriguing spot. He also is looking to play baseball on the next level, hitting 94 miles an hour on his fastball this summer for the left-hander. But he's raved about both LSU football and LSU baseball in the past. My RPMs on Texas A&M, I think there's some nervousness around College Station right now. There was some confidence around Oregon coming out of his official visit to Eugene in the summer, but LSU's in the thick of this one. I think Texas has to rally. So LSU in a very interesting spot for Jonah Williams as we talk right now, going into another visit to Baton Rouge.
All right. Now, safety Anquan Fagans out of Alabama is going to make a decision next week right here on the On3 Recruits channel, which is why you guys should be subscribed. Go ahead, smash that button for us. Anquan Fagans trending heavily to Auburn, but does LSU have a chance to shift the momentum late with this visit?
You always have a chance with a visit, but I think Auburn's going to be tough to beat. That's where a lot of the intel is, but LSU's going to swing here.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know what, Josh? People are going to make summer decisions, but then games will be played in the fall, and then recruitments will be revisited at the end there in November with new NIL opportunities and all of that. So we're just covering the first chapters, the first rounds for some of these kids. And I'm not saying that's the case with Anquan Fagans, but I just want to put what recruiting in the 2025 cycle is going to be like in perspective. We're covering all these recruitments. We're covering all these commitments. Everyone's excited. But some of these commitments might be bachelor party commitments. You know what I mean by a bachelor party commitment, Josh? That initial excitement. Everyone's looking at you, patting you on the back, saying congratulations. But the marriage commitment for some of these guys is going to come in November and December after everything's revisited.
Yeah. Hey, you can't have decommitment season without commitment season first. So we got to have commit season, which we're in. And then later on, once the games get played, like you said, we'll go through decommitment season
Spatula
and then
season, dude.
Signing. So
Spatula season's what we're calling on the whip around.
It always works out. You know, it's the life cycle of recruiting. All right. Speaking of the life cycle of recruiting, you know, Michigan was feeling really good about themselves. They flipped Ivan Taylor from Notre Dame. Well, now they got to go on the defensive a little bit because their wide receiver commitment, Philip Wright III, is going to be at LSU this weekend. He's from Louisiana, from the state of Louisiana. What do you think the chances are that LSU can take out that spatula and flip Philip Wright?
I think they feel good about it. If you talk to people around the LSU football program, commits and things of that nature, and how can you not? I mean, LSU's track record of landing in-state targets, unless you're Alabama and occasionally Texas A&M going in there, they're hard to beat. Now, Michigan gave themselves a hell of a head start on Philip Wright. Ron Bellamy, receivers coach, is from Louisiana. Philip Wright's a high academic kid. But LSU's turning it up for him right now as they try and put together a special receiver class. Just landed Derek Meadows beating Notre Dame. Can they ultimately beat Michigan for Philip Wright? I think, yeah. I mean, obviously he's got interest. He's visiting this weekend. And if I'm the Maize and Blue, I'm worried. But you hang in there. He picked you for a reason, and we'll see what happens.
All right. We got Jakeem Stewart making a visit. He's the 5-star in the 2026 class that could end up in the 2025 class. He's the number 1 defensive lineman in America for next year, but he's going to be on campus this weekend at LSU. There's obviously rumors that he could reclassify. What are you hearing about that and just his recruitment in general?
Well, I think he's still trying to reclassify. We'll see if he's able to get that done. And then LSU, momentum has been around USC, Ohio State, and Oregon for this for Jakeem Stewart, but it's just hard at the end of the day to say he's not going to end up at LSU. So he's going to be back there this weekend, camped with Bo Davis and company earlier in the summer. And so, again, it's easy to say, hey, I like USC as the leader right now, but I just think LSU is going to do what they can to make it hard for him to say no to the Tigers when it's time to make that final decision.
All right, let's whip it around to Knoxville, where Tennessee is going to have a big visit weekend. And one of the prospects that's going to be on campus is also making a decision on Saturday. Lagonza Shady Hayward, out of the state of Georgia, one of the top uncommitted safeties in America, is going to make his decision this weekend. So does it bode well for Tennessee that he's also expected to be on campus?
You know, I love Tennessee in this recruitment, Josh. One of my first on 3 RPMs when I got to
Day one.
this fantastic network was Lagonza Hayward, day one. I like Tennessee. Now, that doesn't mean it's been easy since April 1 for the Vols. Florida gave him a lot to think about. I thought coming out of his official visit to Georgia, maybe he ends up a Bulldog. But Tennessee got the last official visit the weekend of June 21st. They prioritized him the longest. He loves his fit in that defense with guys like Coach Banks and Coach Martinez. And I think he's going to end up a Vol this weekend when he announces his commitment. Another major get for Tennessee if they're able to pull it off after getting Christian Gass last weekend. That'd be 2 top 100 defensive wins over SEC powerhouse programs as they try and become a program that can consistently beat the Alabamas and Georgias of the world.
I love it if you're a Tennessee fan. All right. 2 flip targets on campus. Want to ask you about both these guys. Jaden Perlotti committed to Georgia, another Georgia battle. He's a linebacker. And then athlete Dwayne Morris, who's committed to USC. They're both expected to be on campus. Can Tennessee flip both these guys?
Yeah, I think so. With Perlotti, there's been a lot of buzz about Tennessee being on the verge of flipping him. I think his family's still saying the right things to Georgia as well. We've seen Georgia hold off flips to Auburn, to Florida State in the past. Can they do it again with Tennessee? We'll see. There's been a lot of momentum around the Vols and Perlotti. And then with Morris, he's a running back committed to USC right now, but obviously he's made some visits to Tennessee and has high interest in the in-state Vols. I think Tennessee's turning it up for him. They're also recruiting Chroma and Shakai Mills-Knight, but I think they have a better chance at Morris.
Right. All right. Now, on campus this weekend, one of the most important targets, quarterback Faison Brandon, the number 1 quarterback in the 26th cycle. He's going to be on campus, and a decision from him could come before summer ends. So Faison Brandon in Knoxville this weekend. What do you make of it and where the Vols stand for him?
Yeah, he has his decision date locked in for early August, and my on 3 RPMs in for Tennessee, and I haven't heard anything to make me change that. There was a time where maybe coming out of an Alabama visit this summer, that looked intriguing. LSU, Joe Sloan, they're really battling, and I think he's got high interest in LSU. But I like Tennessee's. I think the one last thing this weekend when he visits is getting around George McIntyre and seeing how he meshes with Tennessee's 2025 commit at the position. But everything else looks really strong for Tennessee. He always enjoys his visits. He threw for the Vols this summer. He's gotten to work with Coach Halsey, the offensive coordinator, been around Heupel a lot, always feels at home in Tennessee. I think that will be his future home the way it stands right now.
Yeah, and with the unofficial recruiting coordinator, George McIntyre, in town, you know things are going to heat up for Tennessee. Vol fans, let us know. Comment section below. How do we feel about this weekend? Shady Hayward going to jump on board? What about these flip targets? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, let's whip it around. We're going to go out to the Plains. Big Cat weekend is here. They got some key targets on campus, including edge Jared Smith, who is set to make a decision right here on the On 3 Recruits channel on August 3rd. Going to be a big day for commitment, so you guys are going to want to be subscribed. Jared Smith trending heavily to Auburn at the right time, Steve.
Yeah, this is the weekend that started it all, that's made us so busy this week, Josh. Big Cat weekend, getting prospects on campus in an environment that's more like a barbecue, 3-legged races. I don't know if they're going to be racing with eggs on spoons, pie eating contests, the whole 9. Auburn top recruits getting a chance to hang out with coaches and their families in an environment that's fun, and it's been duplicated across the country since then. Jared Smith, love where Auburn stands there. At one point, I was very high on South Carolina's position there, but my on 3 RPM is on Auburn for Jared Smith, who's going to announce early next week. And Auburn pushing for a second straight top 10 class. Him and his teammate Anquan Fegans would be big in that pursuit.
Yeah, and speaking of Anquan Fegans, he's going to make his decision here on on July 29th. Sorry, on July 29th, Anquan Fegans right here on the On 3 Recruits channel. Now, if Auburn fans had any concern over his late visit to LSU this weekend, they're going to be happy to know that Fegans will be back on the Plains for Big Cat weekend as well. Do you think this locks it in for the Tigers?
Well, they've been the one to beat for a long time, so it's up to LSU to change that pulse in the recruitment this weekend. I think that's a lot to ask. I think there's been a lot of things moving behind the scenes in favor of Auburn as he gears up for his announcement. Certainly excited about the Hugh Freeze era at Alabama. They were at the Iron Bowl this past year. They've been to campus a bunch, and he thinks he can make a real impact on a program that's on the rise.
Hey, why not? All right, now cornerback Blake Woodby, he decommitted from Ohio State in mid-May, and ever since then, Auburn's made a concerted effort to land him. It looks good. He's going to be on campus this weekend. Do you have Blake Woodby on commit watch?
I think he's going to be in the class for Auburn. Thought that way since before his official visit in June. Now he's back for Big Cat weekend, and it's setting up nicely for the Tigers.
All right. 2026 targets on the Plains. Who you watching?
Yeah, it starts with Hezekiah Harris, one of the most coveted edge rushers in the land, logged an on-3 RPM in favor of Auburn last week to land Hezekiah Harris. Then you got a couple linebackers, Shatarius Tootle and Jamichael Garrett. I have an on-3 RPM in favor of Auburn for Tootle. I'll probably have one on Garrett by the end of the weekend. He's got a big visit to LSU. LSU's been making that recruitment interesting, but working that recruitment with my colleague Chad Simmons sounds like it's still good for Auburn as it stands right now.
All right, let's whip it around to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Barbecue at the Big House. Steve, who do you have your eyes on at Michigan this weekend?
Well, obviously, I love where Michigan stands for Andrew Marsh, on 300 receiver from Texas. He's going to commit in August. Michigan, the heavy trending team coming out of his official visit in June. Now he's back for the barbecue at the Big House. So love Michigan there. Jaden Sanders is an on 300 safety from the Lone Star State. I think Michigan's battling Oklahoma State there, but they're rising in the recruitment of Jaden Sanders. And then you have on 300 receiver Jerome Miles, one of the fastest players in the country. Michigan's kind of new into that recruitment. Texas A&M and Utah are two that I think are well positioned, but Michigan, LSU, Penn State are a few that are going to get a chance to make a move. Coming in for the barbecue at the Big House, get them back for an official visit in the fall. I think Michigan can make a run at Jerome Miles as well. Michigan got a top 10 pound-for-pound recruiting class in the country right now, defending national champs, doing well on the trail.
All right, let's whip it around to Eugene, Oregon, hosting some elite 2026 prospects. But first, I want to talk about some big news that you put out on Thursday morning, and Duck fans can kind of take an exhale because on Wednesday, you reported that Trey McNutt would be visiting Texas A&M this weekend. Didn't sound good for Duck fans, but today, Thursday morning, you got some intel that Trey McNutt is going to also make it to Eugene. That's huge for the Ducks. Tell us about it.
Yeah, he texted me this morning, said he'll be at Oregon after his visit to Texas A&M. I think Oregon's still the one to beat for Trey McNutt. It's up to Texas A&M to flip that with 2 days in College Station. He loves the elite safety coaching at Texas A&M, his words. But Oregon, he's always felt at home, always felt like a priority. He's always said Dan Lanning is different, loves the trajectory of the program, the impact he can make on a run to a national championship, and he's going to get back to Oregon after a Texas A&M visit. He's going to announce on August 3rd on the On3 Recruits YouTube channel, so make sure you're liked and subscribed. And as of right now, I still like the Ducks.
All right, now one 2026 prospect we got to talk about is Tredarian Ball. He's the number 5 ranked running back in America. He's going to be on campus this weekend. Is this a top target for Oregon?
Absolutely, and Oregon leads. My on 3 RPMs on Oregon for him, and I have him on commit watch coming into the weekend. So some potential fireworks for the Ducks in 2026.
All right, we got there's a 5-star we didn't talk about. Michael Terry III is also going to make it to Oregon. With all this Dasan Brom talk about him flipping to Tennessee, does Michael Terry's value just increase now for Oregon? Is it that much more important that they land him?
Well, he was always a priority. They wanted them both. We'll see what happens with Brom in Tennessee, but Michael Terry was a coveted guy that on his official visit, they had DeAnthony Thomas show him around and say, you can fit in our offense the same way DeAnthony Thomas did back during the Chip Kelly era. That was very exciting for him. He's got Texas, then Oregon, then Nebraska. Those are the 3 schools. We'll see where the dust settles after these trips.
Unbelievable weekend up in Eugene. Duck fans, let us know how we feeling. Comment section below. It's a big weekend. Let us know. All right, Steve, end the show. You're at Big Ten Media Days. What's some thoughts about some of the conversations you've been having with some of these big-time head coaches?
Well, Lincoln Riley's super excited about the trajectory of his program at USC. He thinks, in his opinion, he's got the defensive staff in place to get them where they want to be on that side of the ball, led by Deontin Lynn, but to hire Coach Ertz with the linebackers and Coach Henney with the defensive line, Coach Belk in the secondary. It's a revamped coaching staff that has a lot of coaching pedigree, and he's super excited about that. And then the physicality on the offensive side of the football. So a lot of confidence with Lincoln Riley and USC. Matt Rule also sees his program on the rise, similar to what he did at Temple, similar to what he did at Baylor. The thing that was most interesting with my conversation with Matt Rule is roster retention, having the NIL dollars to make sure, because him and Luke Fickell kind of said it at the same time, actually. So I'm going to lump them in together. Two guys that built great programs, Fickell at Cincinnati and then Rule at Temple and Baylor. Roster retention, having your guys that you recruit and develop, keeping them on the roster. And to do that nowadays, you have to have the NIL dollars to keep your young players in the program and happy. And them emphasizing that was a key talking point for me. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Wiltfong Whip Around. We'll have all kinds of coverage from the big recruiting weekends on the On3 channel. Wiltfong Whip Around will be off next week as I'll be on vacation, but you'll still be able to be caught up on the best recruiting intel and news with the inside scoop and the 5-star flex on the On3 YouTube's channel. So please make sure you're hitting like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys when I get back.